How many times have you seen or encountered something that defies explanation? Something that goes against all logic? Something that seems like it just can't possibly be true? It's possible that even the most rational and reasonable of us have had at least one thing in our lives that just kind of makes you wonder. And there will probably be plenty of us that truly believe we saw something but chose not to tell anyone else. Not because we doubted it ourselves, but because we knew that no one would even believe us. Which is very ironic because if we all have these interactions, yet we're all going around saying, nah, that couldn't happen. It seems like a little bit of a syndrome humanity has. Anyways, today we're looking into an incident that has a lot of these kind of same trademarks. Something that sounds completely irrational and unbelievable, but something that multiple people within a group are adamant occurred. An encounter with life from out of this world, not just meeting with them or seeing them briefly flying overhead, but instead, if they are to be believed, engaging in a multi-hour firefight with them. So, strap on your Mjolnir armor. Today we were looking into the Kelly-Hopkinsville encounter and finding out how plausible we think it is. Today, we're headed over to Kentucky and to Christian County towards the west side of the state. Kelly is a small settlement located close to the much larger Hopkinsville. The whole of Christian County has a population in the most recent census of just around 70,000 people and covers an area somewhere in the region of 1,800 to 1,900 square kilometers in heathen units, or in the Lord's numbers, 720 square miles. Hopkinsville is home to nearly half of that population and is the state capital. The county as a whole is famed for its crop production, providing much of the state's output, as well as having a strong agricultural history and tradition. But especially in the case of Kelly, it is probably best known for a strange incident that occurred there in the 1950s, one that would put these otherwise fairly innocuous places on the map and lead to an interest that persists to this day. Let's go back to the time of August 1955 and relive this bizarre encounter. Also, I just want to point out, have you noticed like the 1940s and 1950s are always when things like aliens were a big deal and people were claiming all this stuff? I've maintained on this channel, like, take a species, right? Like, let's say humanity progresses to the point that we leave Earth and we're kind of just going around the cosmos looking for planets to inhabit or to see if there's life out there. Well, if you come across a species that is like rubbing sticks together to make fire, you're gonna be like, oh, well, I mean, they're doing it, so, you know, maybe in a few 100,000 years they'll be smarter and we can communicate with them. But then you come across a species that is literally splitting the atom. You might be like, yo, they're a little further along. Let's actually kind of investigate and see what's going on here. I think after we created the nukes, it's entirely possible if these alien encounters did happen, it's very likely that it came from the fact that we did create nukes, because it delineated us from just building fire that we had been doing for so long prior. Anyhow, on the 21st of August 1955, a group would enter the police station in Hopkinsville and report something that would continue to defy explanation. According to them, they had just recently managed to make their way to the police station as they had spent the previous several hours in a pitched gunfight. And while this would be notable enough by itself, they believed that their opponents in this conflict were something completely out of this world. They described their attackers as having arrived in a spaceship or flying saucer that landed near their farmhouse. From this unidentified craft, a number of small creatures emerged and began to close in on the house, at which point the adults picked up their weapons and began to fire at them to try to hold them off. The group consisted of 5 adults and 7 younger children. The adults in the group were named Billy Ray Taylor, Elmer and John Sutton, Glennie Langford, and O.P. Baker. O.P. being the overpowered of the group. 3 of the children were Glennie Langfords, named Mary, Charlton, and Lonnie. Also, it's not Charlton, I don't know, it's Charlton. Anyways, some of the group were members of the same extended family, and some of the rest were visiting carnival workers that just so happened to be at that house at that time. Remember, it's the 1950s, so a little bit weirder time back then, but when they began to describe the other combatants, they believed them to be somewhere between 2 to 4 feet tall and had very odd physical features. They sported large pointed ears and had eyes that glowed in the darkness. They also allegedly had claw-like fingers and thin legs. Some reports also claimed that they had green-tinged skin, which led to a common descriptor in the media articles about the event describing them as little green men or goblins. sounds. They had appeared at the window of the house, a strange face pressed up against the glass, causing those inside to absolutely panic. Understandable. One had apparently reached inside and grabbed the hair of an occupant, at which point they took up arms and began to open fire and defend their house. They estimated that there were somewhere between 12 to 15 of these creatures that were swarming the building from their spacecraft. And on that odd occasion that a bullet did manage to hit them, it pinged off with a metallic sound, so they were cheating. Also, apparently, it would just float down to the ground, and then the alien would just go on to escape. Again, they're cheating. It's sort of like, was it the Yautjas or the Sangheili? Look, if you want to go invisible and be a virgin about this, and like not be a Chad sight by light sort of scenario, then be my guest. Humanity's eyes, though, number one. So they also reported a strange glow in the background, which they attributed to where their alien craft had landed and where they were all coming from. All in all, the report sounded like complete Armageddon. A nearly unwinnable battle raged against an enemy that sounded nothing like anything known in this world anyways. The authorities who were receiving the report were less concerned, at least in the immediacy, probably because there were carnival workers there. With the likelihood that there were aliens or goblins attacking a random farmhouse, it just didn't really seem that possible. They were more inclined to believe that the other combatants were human, and they raced off to the location to assess the damage. Their worry at the time was that they would arrive there to find a scene of chaos and carnage, possibly even multiple injuries or fatalities. But what they found instead was a house that was strangely intact considering the report that they had been given. Yes, there was some damage to the windows that appeared to have been shattered from bullets, but they all seemed to have been broken from the inside by people who were fending off this attack. There were no strange spaceships found, there was no alien-like goblins to be seen, and the whole thing was chalked up to a bit of a strange mystery of people who were apparently just hanging out with random carnival workers. In the aftermath, they would establish that not that many rounds had been fired by the adults inside the house, and in fact, only a single neighbor had even reported hearing gunshots. But the story itself was too sensational to just be swept under the carpet. Soon, the word would spread, and interest in what had happened grew exponentially from there. For those that were skeptical about all things like this, it is the perfect example of a ridiculous story, completely outside the realms of what could be considered reasonable or possible by really anyone. And I use all those descriptive words because most people think that. So, I mean, something that was very obviously, it was so preposterous that there was little point in even pretending to take it seriously. But for believers, it was a number of notable things at once. Firstly, it was plausible, with multiple adult witnesses who seemed to be of sound mind, except for the carnival workers. Secondly, there was physical evidence, with a damaged house proving that there was a gunfight of some description. And most importantly, for those that believe it all to be true, it is one of the most thorough and long-running encounters that anyone had reported with alien creatures. And of course, humanity starts firing on them. Not just a glimpse or a glimmer of these things, not a fleeting glance, but a full-blown interaction over multiple hours. And for both of these camps, for seemingly opposite reasons, the encounter soon became the poster child for alien encounters. There were some claims that members of the agency or the Air Force visited the farm the next day, but these rumors were quashed. This is one of the bits of evidence used by believers to prove that there was something truly significant about this event, a lot more than the official report lets on. But before we get into the possible explanations for the Kelly-Hopkinsville encounter, or battle if that's really what it was, and dive into just how likely or otherwise we think it is it likely? It could be. It's worth briefly mentioning some other stories that have something in common with it. While there may not have been a running gun battle carried out in most of these situations, there are certainly plenty of examples of other alleged close encounters with life forms not from our planet. You might consider the Cash Landrum incident, where two women and a child claimed to have encountered an unidentified object hovering low overhead as they drove through East Texas. While they stopped to observe it, the heat that was emitting from it was so intense that it made their car hot to the touch and even melted parts of the soft plastic on the dashboard. They retreated to their vehicle, but soon saw a squadron of unmarked black helicopters escorting the unknown flying object away from the scene. And their ordeal was far from over, as they began to experience various physical symptoms both in the immediate aftermath and more extreme medical ailments as time passed. In fact, it didn't go well. So despite the fact that there is some skepticism as to how related the injuries and health conditions were to the UFO that they saw, and even some have questioned the event even happening at all, for those that believe them, it serves as one of the most important close encounters with possible alien life. You can actually check out that video on the subject once you're finished with this one. Go on. Well, wait a minute. You need to finish this one after this is over. Go check it out. For other alien encounters that we are likely to cover in the future, we need to look no further than the Roswell incident, which actually has been covered, possibly the single most well-known incident of its kind in all of history. Back in 1947, reports surfaced of an unidentified flying object, not that unusual in and of itself, but this one actually crash-landed in the desert near Roswell. While the official version of events, does anybody believe those, pins this strange sighting and subsequent crash landing and the relative secrecy around it that was kept about the whole thing on the fact that it was part of a secret operation that was developing novel aircraft for Army use. Not everyone was convinced. Many believed that the sightings of a flying disc in the area around the same time were civilians that had spotted an alien flying low overhead, at least over the desert, and that the U.S. Army had moved quickly to secure the site and acquire the debris. Not because it was any sort of clandestine operation, but because they had finally gotten their hands on not only alien technology, but life forms themselves. These rumors and theories only grew with time, especially since authorities took a while to fully explain the real and official story, which gripped the minds of the public and those with interest in alternative theories to a near unprecedented extent. Also, I know, they can't tell us everything, obviously, but do you guys really believe the official story? So the Roswell incident became immortalized in TV and books and further afield as it became the poster child for those who truly believed that this was something else and it was just beyond anything that we would be told. And the case for it all just being a top secret weather balloon was made harder to prove as bit by bit people would emerge from the woodwork and bolster the alternative theories. Men who claimed to have worked in the area for the government at that time, bearing tales of live aliens being recovered and experimented on, alleging to have seen or possessed footage that proved their beliefs, and spinning tales that towed a very tight line between being plausible and unbelievable. They spoke of secret hangars that were kept specifically to house alien aircraft. They mentioned specific bits of debris that were from the crash site, many of which turned out to be a complete hoax. It wouldn't be until the 1990s that the full information about Project Mogul was released by the US government, the program that they stated this balloon was from, and by that time the alternative narrative had only grown in popularity and plausibility, but eventually fully coming clean nearly half a decade after the original event. The government had not put themselves in the strongest position for believability, and they never do. Or, if you like the alien encounters from across the pond, the Rendlesham Forest incident has been called Britain's Roswell. Again, this is an event that would probably require a video all of its own to unpack, which I have. But the basic gist is that it's not far, essentially from a Royal Air Force base called Woodbridge, and a security patrol from that base would see multiple lights falling from the sky and landing in the nearby Rendlesham Forest. They would enter the forest in order to get a closer look at whatever had landed there, presuming at the time that it could have been an aircraft that had been downed, instead claimed to have seen a glowing metal object covered in lights of various colors. Although it was reported when the authorities went back to investigate, there was no sign of that aircraft, and instead there were just indents in the ground that could have been indicators of where it had landed. They would then take radiation readings from the alleged landing site about 2 days later and find them higher than expected. While they were doing this testing, they witnessed another unexplained light, this time red in color, flashing across the sky to the east. It remains one of UK's most divisive UFO tales, with skeptics explaining it away any way that they possibly can, and believers holding it up as the gold standard for solid proof of extraterrestrial life. If this video has gotten you in the mood for more things extraterrestrial, well, then you might want to check out my video also on the secret alien base. But for now, it was in Mexico. It's called the Phoenix Lights. Haha. But for now, let's check out what's kind of going on with the Kelly-Hopkinsville encounter to see what explanations were offered at that time and in the years since to explain whatever happened that night. So what theories should we look to when we start to analyze this encounter? The first would have to be that there is always a chance it was entirely accurate and truly reported. It's only fair to consider the fact that this could be the case, of course. It's possible that there was something maybe truly beyond our understanding that happened that night. It also could have just been a bunch of carnies attacking. We don't know. So at the same time, we also need to acknowledge that when it comes to the actual physical firefights with aliens, the examples are vanishingly rare. But is that truly enough to dismiss what happened that night? While there have never been any confirmed instances of physical fights between humans and aliens, it doesn't mean, for believers at least, that we can just simply dismiss it outright. After all, would it truly be beyond the reach of our government and various agencies to cover up something as large scale as this? Imagine the intergalactic relations. And if they did, why would they allow them to report it to authorities in the first place and then let the story get as much attention as it did? Maybe to make them crazy. Were the carnies even there in the first place? These are things you probably need to ask. Believers will then point towards the other alien encounters, such as Roswell in particular, and note that the physical description of the creatures involved in the battle seem to track with what would be expected as an alien form. There are, of course, equally compelling arguments made by those who are more cautious about accepting the story just at face value. One of the greatest explanations is that the group suffered from some sort of brief but strong group delusion, where they truly did believe that they were under attack from strange creatures that were swarming the house from outside and did their best to fend them off. That when they went for help, they really did think that they had just been involved in a pitched battle with these unknown life forms and had barely escaped with their lives and the lives of their children in the house. After all, if something unknown had happened suddenly at the window and then seemed to reappear again over and over, it wouldn't take very much for panic to set in and for everyone inside that building to start to believe that they were being attacked. If skeptics are not willing to accept that there were creatures unknown that were at least assailants, either aliens from a spacecraft or goblins from underground or anything else, then what else could they have seen? One of the more compelling suggestions, as ridiculous as it may sound at first, comes in a feathered form. Owls. Specifically, great horned owls. And this rather outlandish explanation might hold a little more water than it first appears to. We can start with the obvious. Owls can fly, and some of the aliens that the group shot at were apparently flying or floating. As they reported, when they shot at some, they floated down to the ground and then escaped. Owls have famously large and reflective eyes, especially if viewed in the gathering dusk, which is when the attack was alleged to have started. They could well match the description given of the aliens. The great horned owl also can be of considerable height, which comes close to the estimates actually given by the group, and wildlife experts have also noted that they are not only famously territorial, but are also active around this time that the incident took place. How possible is it that maybe a massive owl either flew into the window or maybe appeared at it, and then the occupants panicked, they misidentified it as an attacking alien or goblin, and then started shooting at it? Unlikely perhaps, but still possible. What then of the extended attack, of the pitched battle where the numbers of enemy never really seem to dwindle or disappear? Well, given the comparison between the extent of the gunfire reported by the party and the physical evidence at the scene, it would be fair to say, even for believers, that there may have been some minor exaggeration related to parts of the story, perhaps not even intentionally, maybe from just adrenaline and panic. But how many owls flying at you and into your windows would it really take before you start to feel like you were surrounded and being endlessly attacked by a group? 5, 10, 15 owls? Probably 10 owls. That's my plan. And finally, some consideration needs to be given of the possibility that they fabricated the entire event for nothing because they were hanging out with carnival folk. I mean, look, I'm not bashing the carnies or anything, but clowns freak me out, man. I don't like them, and it's just, why would you be hanging out with random carnival people? Anyways, out of all the possibilities, this is probably the weakest. There was little to be gained from this tall tale, if that was indeed what it was. Now, it has been suggested that some of the adults in the group may have been drinking that night, which would probably explain a lot, but it has never been offered as specific and a standalone reason to doubt the story. No tangible benefit was really directly reaped by the group, other than the renewed interest in the location from UFO enthusiasts, but that was hardly something that could have been foreseen ahead of time and accounted for before. So as always, this is really up for you to decide which of any of these theories do you believe to be the most plausible. And as always, there is arguably enough strong evidence to make a case for most of them individually, I suppose. So there you have it, the Kelly-Hopkinsville encounter. Depending on who you ask and what you choose to believe, there are a number of explanations that we've talked about here, and probably many more that you can come up with yourself. That can be supported by the evidence that remains, that's very clear. So was this a case of mass hysteria and delusion, a group driving themselves into a frenzy over something that was either imagined or exaggerated in their minds? Was it nothing more than a hoax, a lie, a deliberately embellished tall tale that grew arms and legs, spreading so far and getting so big that they had no choice but to go with it? Or is every part of this story true? There's always the possibility. I mean, it's one that needs to be treated on the same level of scrutiny as all others. After all, if the witnesses are telling the truth and the evidence left behind matches their story, then would it be fair to say that we have maybe, at least partially, may have had something happening? And should we consider the possibility that this was all factual and a complete, correct retelling of what happened? What's not up for debate, though, is that one way or another, it did put up the rural place on the map, and Now it's one of the most well-known and researched UFO encounters in history. Whether you believe the people that day were really engaged in a multi-hour firefight with creatures from outer space is up to you to decide. Now, as always, I like to jump in on these things. Okay, so first off, we have the major issue of why are you hanging out with I don't get why you're hanging out with carnies, unless they knew them. But apparently, they weren't supposed to know these people. They were just carnies. It's like, oh, we had a great time at the carnival. You should come over to our house. Again, 1950s, I guess. All I'm saying is when you have people drifting through town like this, it is entirely possible that people may just want to screw with the locals. That happens a lot, believe it or not, especially happened back in the day. Now, would they go as far as to allow themselves to be shot at if they're just screwing with the owners of the house? Probably not. So here's what I would suggest. Was it an owl? It could have been an owl, obviously. Was it other carnival folk? That is a possibility, I think. I think what happened is they were playing a prank on them, and then they started opening fire. Nobody could really see what was going on. Those people who were playing the prank ran off, and then you just had a bunch of scared people in a house shooting through windows at anything that they heard. Now, the human mind does some terrible things when it's scared. It makes up stuff. It forgets things easily. It completely changes the environment. It's just how we are wired, I guess is the best way to put it. In the absence of information, your brain, quite literally, it sounds weird, but it'll make it up. It will make up the whole thing. And you will see things, and you will believe them to be true, but it's just not. So, did this actually happen? Well, if it did happen, intergalactic, I guess, relations at this point are pretty bad, which means none of us are going to get a Korean girlfriend, so we can thank these dorks for that. But it is what it is on that front. I personally, this one seems a little too unbelievable for me. It just doesn't seem like it happened. It seemed like maybe some people were drunk, they got scared. Maybe somebody was simply playing a prank on them, and being out in the rural area in the 1950s, you gotta understand, it's like pitch black out there. This was, like, there was almost no light pollution except near very big cities. Yeah, I would have to say I don't think this one is as possible, but maybe you disagree. And maybe you can convince me of the firefight from ODST taking place on these people's lawn. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Did this actually happen? Did this not happen? I'm eager to hear what you guys have to say about this one. Other than that, I appreciate you guys watching. If you enjoyed, then please leave a like as it helps the video get out there. And subscribing is a great way to stay up to date when I post. I want to thank my patrons real quick. At the Literal Wendigo tier, we have Grayson West, Invictus Echo, Monkey Man, and Scrungle. Thank you guys for your awesome support. At the Eyewitness event tier, we have Beaver Malaga and Dragon Master Knight. Thank you guys as well. And at the secondhand accounts tier, we have Bianca, Fred Rush, Pouches, Stutz, and Troy. And to the rest of my patrons, I do appreciate y'all's support as well. It goes a long way towards helping out, so thank you. But all right, that's going to do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I'll see y'all in the next one.